The Galactic Council had ruled over the known universe for centuries, believing themselves to be the ultimate authority in all matters of war, diplomacy, and progress. They saw humanity as a reckless, insignificant species, loud, emotional, and dangerously unpredictable. That illusion shattered the moment the human warship appeared. It was unlike anything the galaxy had ever witnessed, a colossus of blackened metal, armed with weaponry that defied all known physics, hovering silently at the edge of Council-controlled space. It didn't send a diplomatic envoy. It didn't broadcast a demand. It simply existed, a silent statement that humanity had crossed a threshold from which there was no return. Admiral Tereth of the Zalven Dominion felt a deep, primal unease settle into his bones as he observed the warship on the holoscreen. It dwarfed even the largest Council dreadnoughts, its angular, brutalist design exuding a singular message. "We are not here to negotiate." Tareth turned to Jirak, the Council's chief of security, his voice barely above a whisper. "How in the stars did they build that thing?" Jirak, his reptilian features tight with unease, shook his head. "Our intelligence found no evidence of such a project. We believed humans lacked the resources, the infrastructure, the knowledge." "Then we were fools." Tereth's mandibles clicked in agitation. "If they hid something like this, what else are they hiding?" Before Jirak could respond, a deep, commanding voice cut through the Council chamber. It came from the warship, broadcasting directly into their secure communications array. "To the esteemed members of the Galactic Council," the voice said, calm yet edged with unmistakable steel. "For years, you have dictated the terms of our existence. You have dismissed us, disregarded us, and believed we would remain beneath you. That ends today." The chamber erupted into chaos. Some demanded immediate retaliation. Others called for diplomacy. But those who understood humanity best, the few who had studied their history, simply sat in horrified silence. Because this was not a declaration of war. This was a statement of intent. And humans never made threats unless they were fully prepared to see them through. A heavy silence settled over the Galactic Council chamber. The words of the human commander still echoed in the minds of every representative. The warship, a blackened behemoth that dwarfed their most advanced dreadnoughts, hung at the edge of their space like an omen. Admiral Tareth turned toward the Supreme Speaker of the Council, a towering, four-eyed Vortali named Iskar. "We must act now," Tareth hissed. "If we let this thing remain unchecked, humanity will believe they are our equals." A murmur of agreement rippled through the chamber. But Iskar did not respond immediately. His long, clawed fingers tapped the armrest of his throne-like seat. His violet eyes locked onto the holoscreen displaying the human warship. "No species could have built such a vessel in secret," he said at last. "Not without outside help." His gaze swept the room. "Who among us has betrayed the Council?" The chamber erupted in accusations. The reptilian Karath blamed the insectoid Vexar. The amphibious Drell suspected the cunning Varkari traders. No one wanted to admit the unthinkable, that humans had done this alone. Then, the human voice returned. "I would advise against pointing fingers," the commander said, his tone as sharp as a blade. "We did not need help. We did not need permission. And we certainly do not need your approval." The chamber fell silent again. Tareth's mandibles clicked in frustration. "You expect us to believe that your primitive species built that warship without assistance?" The human chuckled. "You call us primitive, Admiral. Yet here we are, speaking on our own terms, dictating our own future. Meanwhile, your fleets, your weapons, your so-called superiority tremble in the shadow of something you cannot understand." A few council members shifted uneasily. "Then what is it you want?" Iskar demanded. His voice was calm, but his claws gripped the armrests tightly. There was a pause. A long, deliberate silence. Then the human replied, "Consider this an introduction." And with that, the warship moved. Without a sound, without a single energy signature, it activated its engines and vanished from the scanners. One moment, it was there, a nightmare made of steel and fury. The next, nothing remained. Gasps of disbelief filled the chamber. "They cloaked an entire warship," Jirak muttered, his scaled hands trembling. "That's impossible." "No," Iskar said, his voice grim. "It's worse than impossible." His violet eyes gleamed with something the Council had never felt before when thinking of humanity. Dread. Because if the humans had built this ship without the Council knowing, if they had learned to cloak such a massive war machine, then the Galactic Council had already lost control. And they had no idea how many more were out there. The shock of the human warship's disappearance sent ripples of panic through the Galactic Council. Entire civilizations had fought wars over less. Cloaking technology was rare, but cloaking something that size, a ship of such unimaginable power, was supposed to be impossible. The fact that humans had done it without the Council's knowledge meant one thing. They had no idea what humanity was truly capable of. Admiral Tereth paced in tight circles, his clawed feet clicking against the polished floor of the Council chamber. "We cannot allow this to stand," he snarled. "This warship, this abomination, is a direct challenge to our authority. Humanity must be reminded of its place." Jirak, still watching the empty holoscreen, spoke carefully. "And what if we are the ones who need reminding?" Tareth spun on him, mandibles flaring. "You fear them." Jirak let out a slow, rattling exhale. "I fear what we don't know. That ship isn't just a weapon, Tareth. It's a statement. Humanity is telling us that they no longer consider us their overseers. They built that warship in secret, cloaked it in ways we cannot comprehend, and then, instead of attacking, they left." His slitted eyes narrowed. "Tell me, Admiral, what do you think that means?" Tareth refused to answer. Instead, Supreme Speaker Iskar rose from his seat, the massive vortally towering over the room. "Enough bickering," he said, his voice like a rolling storm. "The Council has been challenged. The question is, do we respond with diplomacy or force?" The chamber fell into a tense silence. Then a new transmission arrived. The holoscreen flickered, and this time the human commander's image appeared. He was a scarred man with cold, calculating eyes. His uniform bore no insignia, only a single silver emblem shaped like a blade. "Since we seem to have your attention," he said smoothly, "I'd like to clarify a few things." No one spoke. The commander leaned forward slightly, his expression unreadable. "You believe yourselves the rulers of the galaxy, the arbiters of peace and war. You decide which species thrives and which withers under your policies. For years, humanity played along. We followed your rules. We accepted your guidance." His lips curled into a mirthless smile. "But we are not your subjects." The words hung in the air like a blade against the throat of the Council. "We do not seek war," the commander continued, "but we do not fear it. We do not seek to rule, but we will never again be ruled." He leaned back, letting the weight of his words settle. "The ship you saw. It is only one." A cold shudder ran through the chamber. "We built it in silence. We launched it in secrecy, and we are not done." Supreme Speaker Iskar inhaled sharply. "Are you threatening us?" The human gave a slow, deliberate nod. "I am warning you." His voice was calm, yet every syllable dripped with finality. "You believed you could shape the future without us, but now the future belongs to everyone. whether you accept that or not." And with that, the transmission cut out. A long silence followed. No one dared speak. Then, at last, Iskar turned to the council. His violet eyes gleamed with something rarely seen in the halls of galactic power. Uncertainty. "Summon the admirals," he said. "Humanity has made its move." Tareth's claws flexed in anticipation. "Then we must prepare for war." "No." Iskar's voice was quiet but firm. "We must prepare for something far worse. Because if the humans were telling the truth, then the galaxy had already lost its grip on power, and no one knew what would happen next. In the days that followed the human transmission, the Galactic Council found itself in unfamiliar territory, uncertainty. For centuries, they had dictated the course of galactic affairs, ensuring no species ever gained too much power. Whenever an empire grew too bold, the Council crushed it with economic sanctions, fleet interventions, or political sabotage. It had always worked. Until now. Because this time, the threat wasn't a rebellious faction. It wasn't a rogue warlord seeking control. It was humanity, a species they had dismissed as reckless, emotional, and insignificant. And humanity had just revealed a super warship that defied every known law of galactic warfare, and then vanished. That, more than anything, terrified them. On the Council's central homeworld, in the war chambers beneath the grand spire of order, a meeting of the highest-ranking military officials was underway. Holograms of the warship's brief appearance flickered in the dimly lit room. Every detail was scrutinized, analyzed, and dissected, yet no answers emerged. "This defies logic," Tareth growled, tapping his clawed fingers against the table. "A ship of this scale should have taken a century to construct. We have entire fleets monitoring their sector. How did we miss it?" Jirak, still composed despite the tension in the room, spoke with unsettling calm. "The better question is, how many more exist?" A weighted silence fell. Iskar, seated at the head of the table, let out a slow exhale. "What do we know about human military strategy?" An intelligence officer, a sleek furred Varkari, stood and activated a secondary holoscreen. It displayed a timeline of human warfare. Centuries of brutal conflicts, technological leaps, and strategic adaptability. "Humanity has never been the most advanced species," the officer began, "but what they lack in raw technology, they compensate for with ingenuity." A section of the display zoomed in, showcasing battle after battle where humans had fought against superior forces, and won. "They do not fight conventionally," the officer continued. "When outnumbered, they refuse open conflict. When cornered, they become most dangerous. When facing an overwhelming enemy, they innovate beyond expectation." He gestured toward the now-vanished warship. "This vessel is proof of that. It is not merely a warship, it is a statement." Tareth scoffed. "Then we must respond in kind. If humanity seeks to play at war, we will show them the cost of such arrogance." Jirak turned to him. "And if that's exactly what they want?" Tareth bristled, mandibles clicking in frustration. "You think they want war?" Jirak's yellow eyes gleamed. "I think they prepared for it long before we realized it was coming." Meanwhile, light years away, deep within a classified human outpost, the warship's commander stood before a vast tactical display. Around him, officers analyzed streams of data, council fleet formations, intercepted communications, and projected responses. A young officer approached. "Sir, the council is in chaos. Some factions push for war, others hesitate. They're completely off balance." The commander nodded. "Good. Keep it that way." He turned his gaze to a secondary display, one showing dozens of massive blackened vessels sitting in the void, hidden behind layers of cloaking technology. Each one was an improvement over the first, a fleet built in the shadows. The officer hesitated before speaking. "Do you believe they'll listen, sir? Or will they force our hand?" The commander's expression remained unreadable. "They think this is about power, about dominance." His eyes darkened. "They don't understand yet, but they will." He turned away from the display, his voice cold and unwavering. "This isn't a war of conquest, it's a reckoning." And somewhere, in the depths of space, the super warships of humanity waited, hidden, watching, preparing, because the next time they appeared, the galaxy wouldn't be given a warning. Tension in the Galactic Council had reached a breaking point. Every species with a stake in galactic affairs now faced the same question. Was humanity bluffing, or had the balance of power truly shifted? In the war chambers beneath the spire of order, the Council's top strategists and admirals continued their desperate analysis. Hours turned into days, yet no new information surfaced. The warship had disappeared, leaving nothing but fear and speculation in its wake. Admiral Tareth, pacing with barely restrained fury, slammed a fist against the war table. "Enough of this waiting. If they will not show themselves, we will force them into the open." Jirak exhaled slowly. "And how do you propose we do that, Admiral?" Tareth's mandibles flared. "We take the fight to them. If they refuse to answer, we burn their colonies, blockade their trade routes, and remind them who controls this galaxy." For a long moment, Supreme Speaker Iskar said nothing. He studied the table, his claws rhythmically tapping the surface. Then, at last, he spoke. "And if we cannot stop them?" Tareth froze. "You believe we can't?" "I believe we don't know what we're up against," Iskar admitted. His violet eyes locked onto Tareth's, unblinking. "Tell me, Admiral, can you say with certainty how many of these ships they have? Can you say with certainty that attacking them will not provoke a disaster we cannot recover from?" Tareth hesitated. For the first time, he did not have an immediate response. Jirak spoke next, his voice carrying an edge of unease. "We have spent centuries ensuring no species rises too high. But this is different. Humanity has been preparing for something we never saw coming." Iskar leaned forward, his gaze sharp. "And tell me, Admiral, what if we have already lost control?" Tareth's claws curled into a fist. "Then we fight." Iskar's expression darkened. "Then we lose." A long silence followed. Then, without warning, alarms blared through the war chamber. The holoscreen flickered to life, displaying a real-time distress signal. "Emergency transmission from the Vexar border outpost," a technician reported. "They are under attack. Unknown vessel detected." Tareth's heart pounded. "Show me." The holoscreen shifted, revealing grainy footage from the outpost's security feeds. In the darkness of space, something loomed over the station. A warship. Not just any warship. A human warship. Bigger, deadlier, even more advanced than the one they had seen before. And this time, it did not issue a warning. It opened fire. Meanwhile, at the edge of Council space, deep within the darkness of an uncharted sector, the fleet of humanity emerged. Hundreds of blackened warships drifted silently, their cloaking systems disengaging one by one. They were sleek, massive, and bristling with weaponry that no Council fleet could match. The commander of the lead vessel stood at the bridge, watching as the first target, the Vexar outpost, fell in flames. A young officer approached, his voice steady. "We have confirmation. The Council is watching." The commander's lips curled into a cold smile. "Good." His eyes flickered toward the tactical display, where Council fleets scrambled to respond. Too slow, too unprepared. They thought we were insignificant, he murmured. They thought we would kneel. He turned, staring out into the void where his true fleet remained hidden, waiting. They never considered what would happen if we decided to stand. And as the first of many council worlds fell into darkness, one thing became certain. The age of human submission was over. The age of reckoning had begun. Panic spread through the Galactic Council like a virus. The footage of the burning Vexar outpost played on every major communication network, sending a clear and unmistakable message. Humanity was done being ignored. In the war chambers beneath the spire of order, the Council's highest-ranking officials scrambled to make sense of what had just happened. Tareth slammed his fists against the table. "This is an act of war." His voice was sharp, filled with barely restrained fury. "They are attacking our outposts. We must respond immediately." Jirok's scaled hands clenched at his sides. "With what?" he countered. "Our fleets are scattered, unprepared. We don't even know how many of these ships they have." Iskar stood in silence, watching the holoscreen as the wreckage of the Vexar outpost drifted in the void. The attack had been surgical, brutally efficient. Not a single distress signal had escaped before the humans disabled communications. The only reason the Council knew what had happened was because the humans had allowed them to see it. "They wanted us to watch," Iskar said at last, his voice calm but heavy with realization. Tareth turned toward him, mandibles flaring. "What?" "This was not a strategic move," Iskar continued. "They could have wiped out the station and left no trace. Instead, they let us see, let us witness." His violet eyes narrowed. "This was a demonstration. A demonstration of power, a demonstration of control, and the Council had no response. For the first time in recorded history, the Council found itself outmatched." Jirok inhaled sharply. "We must establish contact. We must talk to them before this escalates beyond our control." Tareth snarled. "And what do you propose? We beg for mercy? Humanity only understands strength. If we hesitate, they will see it as weakness." "Or," Iskar countered, "they will see it as wisdom." Tareth scoffed, but before he could argue further, the chamber's communication system activated. A new transmission had arrived, from the humans. The room fell silent. The holoscreen flickered, and once again, the human commander appeared. His expression was unreadable, but his presence alone radiated an undeniable authority. "You have seen what we are capable of," he said. His voice was even, controlled. "Now you have a choice." The Council members waited, barely breathing. "Recognize humanity as an equal, and we will coexist," the commander continued. His gaze swept over the chamber, as if daring them to defy him. "Refuse, and this will be only the beginning." The threat was clear. No more warnings, no more subtle messages, only war. Iskar exhaled slowly. He could feel the weight of history pressing down on this moment. For centuries, the Council had ruled the galaxy unchallenged, and now that rule was being shattered. Humanity had risen from the shadows, and they had come to collect. The Supreme Speaker met the human commander's gaze, his voice steady. "What are your terms?" Tareth stiffened in outrage, but Iskar ignored him. This was no longer a question of pride. It was a question of survival. The human commander nodded slightly, as if satisfied. "Then let us talk." And as the Council prepared for what would become the most crucial negotiations in galactic history, one thing was undeniable. The balance of power had shifted forever. The Galactic Council chamber had never been so silent. For centuries, species had argued, negotiated, and maneuvered for dominance within these very halls. Empires had risen and fallen based on the Council's decisions. But never, never had the Council been placed in a position where they were forced to bend. Yet, here they were, facing a human warship commander who had just dictated terms. Supreme Speaker Iskar kept his expression unreadable, but internally, his mind was racing. He had anticipated that humanity would demand sovereignty, perhaps even full autonomy outside of Council control. But something in the human commander's tone, his confidence, suggested that this was not just about freedom. This was about power. Tareth, still bristling with barely restrained fury, stepped forward. "You demand we recognize you as equals," he spat, "and yet you hold a blade to our throats. That is not diplomacy. That is extortion." The human commander gave a small, almost imperceptible smile. "Perhaps, but for centuries you have done the same to countless others." His eyes flickered with something unreadable. "Tell me, Admiral, when the Varkari sought to expand, what did the Council do?" Tareth stiffened. He knew where this was going. The human continued. "You sanctioned them, forced them into trade dependency, installed puppet governments that ensured they would never rise too high. You call it maintaining balance." He leaned forward slightly. "We call it subjugation." Jirak shifted uncomfortably. "That is how galactic stability has always been maintained." The commander's voice hardened. "And we are changing that." A heavy silence followed. Iskar inhaled slowly. He knew the humans had prepared for this. Every word, every phrase had been carefully chosen. The Council had relied on its control over information, over military resources, over economic leverage. But somehow humanity had slipped through the cracks. And now they stood before the Council, setting the rules. Finally, Iskar spoke. "What do you truly want?" The commander's gaze never wavered. "We want the old order to fall." A ripple of shock ran through the chamber. This wasn't just about sovereignty. This was about dismantling the entire system. Tareth's voice was cold. "You seek to replace us?" The human let the silence stretch before answering. "We seek to end the Council's rule over other species. No more hidden interventions. No more manufactured wars. No more empires collapsing because you decide they must." His tone was measured, but the underlying threat was unmistakable. "We are not here to take your place," he finished. "We are here to make sure no one else ever does." The Council members exchanged uneasy glances. This was beyond what any of them had imagined. Jirak spoke carefully. "You realize this will not be accepted easily?" The human nodded. "Which is why we have ensured there is no alternative." As if on cue, the holoscreens in the chamber flickered, shifting from the commander's face to live footage. Tareth's breath caught in his throat. Council fleets, entire armadas, the pride of the Dominion, the vanguard of the Karath, the defense squadrons of the Vexar, all surrounded. Dozens of human warships had emerged from the void, each one monstrous in size and lethality. They had positioned themselves perfectly, blocking every strategic retreat, neutralizing every escape route. The humans hadn't just made a move, they had already won. A cold wave of realization swept through the chamber. The Council was no longer in control. Iskar exhaled slowly. His violet eyes met the humans once more. "This is no longer a negotiation," he murmured. The human commander inclined his head slightly. "Number it isn't." Tareth clenched his fists, his mandibles clicking with rage. But he knew. There was nothing they could do. The old order had fallen, and humanity had just claimed the future. The chamber was deathly silent. The weight of the moment pressed down on every council member present. For the first time in recorded history, they were no longer the ones making demands. They were the ones being forced to listen. Tareth's claws dug into the war table as he stared at the holoscreen, watching the hundreds of human warships that had surrounded the Council's fleets. This was impossible. This was a nightmare. Jirak, ever composed, exhaled slowly. How? His voice was barely above a whisper. How did you build so many ships? How did you arm them without us noticing? The human commander gave a small, knowing smile. You were too busy watching everyone else. Tareth's mandibles flared. And where, exactly, did you get the resources? You lack the industrial power, the supply chains. You assumed we did, the human interrupted, his tone calm but firm. Because that's how you've always seen us. Less, behind, dependent on your systems. You never considered that we had been preparing for this very moment. A heavy silence followed. Iskar, ever the strategist, steepled his clawed fingers. His voice was measured, but there was an edge of something almost respectful. You played the long game, he said. The human commander inclined his head slightly. We learned from the best. The words stung, because they were true. For centuries, the Council had manipulated species, guiding their developments, limiting their military expansion, ensuring that no empire ever truly gained full independence. Humanity had studied their methods, and turned them against them. Jirak exhaled slowly. And what happens now? The human's expression remained unreadable. Now. His eyes scanned the chamber, letting the weight of his next words settle over the Council like a suffocating mist. Now, you decide whether this ends with words or fire. Tareth hissed. You think you can dictate terms to us? The human's voice hardened. We already have. He gestured to the holoscreen, where the Council's greatest fleets sat paralyzed, surrounded by humanity's warships. Tareth wanted to fight. He wanted to refuse. But deep down he knew the truth. The Council could not win, not today, maybe not ever. Iskar's violet eyes remained locked on the human. And if we comply? The commander gave a slow nod. Then we step into a new era, an era where the Council no longer dictates the fates of others, where no species, not even humanity, has unchecked power. His gaze darkened slightly. But if you refuse? The image on the holoscreen changed. The Council's primary shipyard, the beating heart of their war machine. Dozens of human warships had already positioned themselves around it. One command, one order. And the Council's ability to wage war would cease to exist. The message was clear. This was over. Tareth exhaled sharply and turned away, his fists shaking with rage. Jirak remained still, his reptilian gaze unreadable. And Iskar? He closed his eyes for a long moment. He had ruled for centuries, had witnessed the rise and fall of empires. But now, in this moment, he understood. The Galactic Council's reign was over. At last he opened his eyes and spoke the words that would change the galaxy forever. We accept, and just like that, humanity had won, but they were far from finished, because the future was theirs now, and no one knew what would come next. The Galactic Council did not collapse overnight. It did not fall in a fiery coup or in the ruins of a great war. It did something far worse. It yielded. For the first time in its long and storied history, the Council no longer ruled the galaxy through force or manipulation. The old ways, the hidden wars, the controlled economies, the quiet exterminations of civilizations that grew too powerful, were over. The humans had ended them, not with conquest, not with genocide, but with the undeniable, unrelenting truth of their existence. They had built warships that eclipsed anything the galaxy had ever seen. They had outmaneuvered every intelligence agency, outplanned every military strategist, and outlasted every attempt to keep them small. They had shattered the very foundation of galactic power, and now there was no going back. Months later, in the shadow of the spire of order, Supreme Speaker Eskar stood before the gathered leaders of the galaxy, no longer seated in the throne-like chair of absolute authority, but at an equal table, one where humanity now had a seat. The chamber was filled with tension, but not the same kind as before. This was not the fear of invasion, of annihilation. It was the fear of the unknown. "The Galactic Council," Iskar said, his deep voice carrying through the vast hall, "was founded on the belief that order must be maintained at any cost, that power must be controlled, and that no species should be allowed to grow unchecked." He turned, his violet eyes settling on the human representatives. They sat quietly, their expressions unreadable, but the weight of their presence was undeniable. "And yet," Iskar continued, "we failed to see that in doing so we became tyrants." A murmur ran through the chamber. Not outrage, not denial, just acceptance. The humans had forced them to see the truth. Iskar exhaled slowly. "From this day forward, the Galactic Council will no longer be a force of control. It will no longer dictate the fates of entire civilizations from the shadows." His voice grew stronger. "From this day forward, the Council will exist as equals among equals." Silence. Then, from the human delegation, a slow nod of approval. No words needed to be spoken. The message was clear. The old order was dead. And in its place, something new had begun. Far from the political chambers, beyond the Council's borders, in the cold depths of space, a lone human warship drifted in the void. It was unlike the warships that had come before. Not a vessel of battle, but of exploration. Its hull bore no weapons, only sensors and deep space research equipment. And on its side, etched into the blackened metal, were the words that marked the beginning of this new chapter in galactic history. United Terran Fleet, Dawn of Horizons. Because now, for the first time, humanity wasn't preparing for war. It was preparing for what came next, and the galaxy would never be the same again.